Oh, hi everyone. Today we are going to discuss how it was that I came to the realization that I was transgender, not the gender I was assigned at birth. As I've only just recently come out as my authentic self, I think now is easily the best time to discuss this, just while everything's fresh and relatively new. Now, the phrase I've used there, assigned at birth, is one a lot of cisgendered people have questioned, just like a lot of cisgendered people have questioned the term cisgender, which very briefly means comfortable in skin. Basically, you're happy with what you were assigned at birth. And it's quite literal in its meaning. The reason we use the term cisgender is that cisgendered people typically tend to identify themselves as normal. But what's the norm for them is obviously not the norm for someone like me. If we assume that cisgender is the norm, then that by default makes everything that is not cisgender abnormal, which I'm sure you can understand has some negative connotations and can detract from any sense of equality that we might be when discussing trans issues and gender dysphoria. So I think it's important that while discussing trans issues and gender in general, that we use a term that makes everything seem a little bit more fairer, because everyone's norm is normal to them, whether they're cisgender or transgender or non-binary and so on. Anyway, back to the video. So when we're born in the Western world, as we all know, first thing that happens probably is a doctor picks us up, yeah? And they will look at what's between your legs. They will scribble on a bit of paper that you're either a boy or a girl. And that's a decision you, as a completely new individual in the world, who no one knows anything about yet, have to live with the rest of your life, which isn't really particularly fun when they get that wrong, really. Yeah. Recent studies show that children from as young as 3 years old, which basically I think is when most children start to talk, are able to actually express their gender identity. I think awareness of this is very much why we are starting to see a lot more visibility of trans youth. I think it's primarily thanks to the internet, something I never had access to as a child. Information about gender variance and transition is more accessible than ever. I think this ability to share ideas is very much why there's a perceived increase in the trans population. But I don't think there really is an increase. I think it's more the access to this information is enabling people to become more aware and gain a better understanding of feelings that they've always had. I think people that tend to transition, like myself, that transition in adulthood rather than earlier in life, seem to always have feeling that there was some kind of gender variance, but they didn't necessarily have the knowledge to express that. And if I always felt like I was a girl, in that case, why do I wait? Why at 28 instead of earlier? I felt this way since I was a child. And I think that's a fair question to ask. And that's one I asked myself as well before I start to take any action regarding this. The ways early in my life that I wanted to express my identity, many of my behavioral characteristics went very much against the norm for the environments I was in when I was growing up as a child. I was made to feel like I might have a mental illness, and I already had a very massive stigma about mental illness from one of my very earliest memories. Talk about that another time. When I tried to talk about feelings about myself and my gender and who I was, when I tried to express them, they tended to bring ridicule and pain in almost every situation. And when you're made to feel like that suffering is your fault, that there's something wrong with you and it's because of those feelings, and there's no one out there that you feel like you can talk to, and there is no one you can actually talk to and explain these things to. And you can't really express what you want from life and what you want to be. After years and years and years and years and years and years, I think you kind of just get worn out and you start to believe the lies people tell you. And you come to align with their point of view. And you give up on the things you want from life. And you give up on your ambitions. And you give up on who you are. And you change yourself so that you're not the victim anymore. So that you can stop hurting, because it's a lot easier to be the person on the other side than the person being victimized. And you do that so that you're not the one hurting, regardless of what else might happen. And in the place of these feelings that you bury, you get this strange kind of gnawing sensation, like right in the pit of your stomach, as if grasping upwards into your heart. Strange kind of uneasy insecurity that is dysphoria. And it's easy for that to grow into much more serious problems like anxiety and depression that take a very strong and deep root in who you are, and they affect the way that you perceive yourself and the world around you and the way people, or at least your understanding of the way people might perceive you. I think it wasn't until 14, but from as early as I can remember, that I was actually removed from these environments. But by that point, I think I was very much conditioned. That was my norm by that point. I had a sort of created a mental block as a defense mechanism, because I'd associated who I was inside with pain and suffering, and you kind of forget a little bit. It's always there, always coming up in bouts of extreme depression and anxiety here and there, but once those pass, you put it back as if, and you kind of forget about it as if it was nothing, because you train yourself for that kind of behavior. It's how you survive and how you reduce the amount of pain you feel, but you don't really. And when you're suddenly in a place where you can embrace who you are, when you've had that mindset for so long, it's not like just flipping a switch. You can't just suddenly think, ooh, yay, I'm out of that horrible situation. For the most part, I can now be myself. It's not that easy. It takes a really long time to heal. It takes learning to understand mental illness and the conditions you deal with. And it takes a lot of time to really be able to accept what you are, who you are. In my case, I very much needed a catalyst for that healing process to start. For many years, I didn't really start to heal from my dysphoria and my repression. I think it was probably, I was 20 years old. I had 3 instances where I had a catalyst. One right before uni, the other was in the middle of uni, and the other was just a bit over a year ago, really. And in these moments where I had something impact on my life that really made me kind of not able to hold back all these feelings, it wasn't really anything to do with it. It was just kind of, for the most part at least, it was just kind of a thing that happened that meant I couldn't hold my feelings back, and I was overwhelmed completely and utterly. And it's like a chain reaction, like putting Mentos in a bottle of Coke. It just goes everywhere, really. You can't really get it all back in. I mean, you might be able to put the lid on it, kind of, but once it's out, it's out. And while you can kind of work to resolve the issues, it seems impossible to put everything back. And little by little, you start to grow more aware of those feelings. You might not understand them. I sure as hell didn't. But they're familiar. Almost like meeting up with an old friend for the first time you've been in years and years and years. It's like recognizing something that was always there, but you didn't really notice it. Like something on the very edge of your sight that had always been moving as you turned to look at it. But for the first time, you're actually seeing it, and it's right there in front of you. That feeling, that dysphoria, that feeling of wrongness that I had all my life growing up, that I started to recognize, it wasn't just feelings that made me feel bad, but it also made me feel like there was a different way of living that I didn't understand, but I knew. It was a sense of searching, of yearning, of desiring change. And I've been suicidal at many points in my life, and it was always that feeling, my dysphoria, that made me stick around and made me say no to ending it. Because I didn't know when, I didn't know how. I knew that there was something I had to do and that I was living wrong every time. My dysphoria saved my life. I didn't understand it. And when I finally did, I couldn't really even start to fathom or put it into words, that feeling I felt. The relief was overwhelming when I understood who I was. It was like seeing all the pieces of a puzzle clip together in a single moment, as all these memories that you've had and forgotten and put aside all resurface, and you realize an absolute certainty of the self. And that was probably the biggest thing ever. It was like depression, anxiety, it all washed away in that single moment of clarity. And it kind of made everything almost seem worth it. And that's when I reached that point, that's when I realized that yes, I was transgender. I didn't need a doctor to tell me. I didn't need to fill out a questionnaire or pass some test. It took a long time. A really long time. And it was like a great journey to reach this point. And now an even better journey has begun. And I can't even begin to explain how excited I am for the things that are going to happen with me. I love that I finally reached that point in my life. And I think we've rambled on long enough. Yes. More to come in the future to explain all the things that have happened. I've been Mara Alexandra on Unapologetically Me. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, do the social media things if you want to do that. And let me know what you think. See you later. Bye.